Hi, my name's Kim and today I'm going to tell you a little bit about art journaling. Art journaling is a fantastic way to express your creativity. What's really great about it is that it happens in a book, so it stays your own, it can be very private, and you don't have to worry about it being viewed by everybody. That's if you want to. It's also a lovely way to share things with your friends if that's what you choose. So we have this fabulous art journaling book that's available. What's really special about it is the paper inside. The paper inside is 250-gram paper, and the paper is all hot press paper, so it means it can handle a lot of medium, but it also has a smooth finish. With it having a smooth finish, it means that you can do a lot of different techniques on the page, including stamping, mixed media, all sorts of things. So it works for a lot of different things. So that's the paper that we're going to work on. So what do we use when we do art journaling? Well, you can use anything. You can use any pens, pencils, paints, colors that you want to create a different effect that you're looking for. It's a great way to be experimental and to try new things out is in your art journal. So what I'm going to do today is we're going to create this little page over here. And on this page, we've done various layers underneath, building them up until we finally get to the finished effect, and it's got my little sentiment about how I feel about my friends on it. So you could do something that suits your kind of journaling, whether you'd like to make it about your spiritual journey or whatever, your travels, whatever you want to journal about, you can journal in this book. So let's get started. So to start off with, I'm going to be using these napkins, and I'm going to be adhering them to the page with a little bit of Mod. So firstly, you need to separate your napkins out. Make sure that you've got just the single layer of napkin paper that you're going to use. You just need the one layer. The rest you can save for later. You're not going to use a lot of them. Here are a couple of bits that I've already torn. And what you want to do when you're doing this is you don't want to have square corners of paper on your page. You want it to be really random and rough. So let's take a little water brush and some water and just tear the corners of the napkin off like that so that it's a little bit rougher and not so very square. You need a few of these because you're going to be doing a fair amount of covering of your page. But what you need to remember at all times when you're doing this is that this is the background of the page. So you don't need to worry too much about a lot of very fine detail. The detail is going to come in one of the top levels and layers on the page. I think we're more or less ready to start putting our paper down. Using your Mod, just randomly brush some of it over your page. And there you go, you put your next layer down. You don't want to work too thickly when you're doing this. You want a thin layer, remembering that you're putting a double layer on and that it's got to dry. And you're going to need some drying time for this to really settle down. Now you can see I'm not very particular. In some places, the napkin is actually folded a little bit. And that's fine for me. I don't mind that. It just gives a lot more interest and texture in the background. So we're creating visual texture, but if it's got a little bit of actual texture, that's also fine. And they can overlap. It doesn't matter. So you're going to continue with this until your page is full and covered. And I've got one that I've done for you that's already dry because the drying time here is really important. So here's one where the paper is already dry. I'm going to move this out the way. What you do need to remember to do is to make sure that your brush gets rinsed. The Mod will stay sticky and you don't want any more stickiness on your page. Right, so now this is a fun technique using gesso. We're going to use gesso and we're going to use the inks to create a lovely coloured background. The effect that I want here is, I don't want this to be very obvious. I want this to be part of the background. So using a white gesso is going to soften this a lot more. So let's get going with that. So I'm getting started with adding a little bit of gesso on the page and just smoothing it out. Now I'm going to use my ink spray and spray it on the page and blend it in with the gesso. And now I'm going to add a little bit of the pink. Once again, blending it in. And you can see I'm working on my craft sheet, so it doesn't matter if I go off the edges. I can get full coverage. Okay. So if you feel that there's a little bit too much gesso here, you can see that the two aren't blended very well. You're just going to use a baby wipe to thin it out a little bit. So now you've got a nice film over the modge that you had underneath and the napkin. It's softened all the colors. You've got gesso on here, so that means that your page is going to be very receptive to any other medium that you put on top of this. The modge underneath was a little bit shiny, and it's not great for working with pens and other inks on top of. So this layer of modge, gesso that we have on here is going to create a perfect medium to do your next layer on. You can have a look at this and decide exactly how you feel about it. Do you want to add a little bit more color? Would you like to add a little bit more effects on the paper or not? But first we have to let it dry. So here's my page once it's dried. I can see that my yellow has really softened a lot. I might have wanted a little bit more yellow on here, but I can add more color now using other techniques. So I'm going to use a little bit of the spray and just spritz it a little bit over the page and give it a little bit of a wipe as well with my brush to spread it around. Give it a rub down with my baby wipe. So I've got a little bit more yellow, and you can see where the yellow and the orange and the red mix, or the yellow and the pink mix, you get a little bit of an orangey color. So this is what you're going to need to do, is to just play around until you've got the right sort of colors for your background, remembering that the background will probably end up disappearing quite a lot, so you can go a little bit brighter probably than what you thought perhaps initially. Great, so let's get going with the next thing. So we're going to add a little bit more interest on the page using a stencil and some more ink. So this is the stencil I'm going to use. I'm not going to use it as a whole. This is a background stencil, so it can create a lot of pattern anywhere on your page with it. And I'm going to use some ink, an ink pad. So using the ink pad, got the little sponge for it in the lid. Take that out, flip it over, and ink up my blending tool. We call this a blending tool. It's a great applicator for adding anything. You could use this for paint if you wanted to too. So I'm just going to do a little bit of background stenciling very randomly on the page. Something like that. Maybe a little bit more over here in the corner. Now we've got a little bit more interest happening on the page. Maybe a little bit in this corner too. So now I've got that. Now I need to move to the images that I've got on here. So to use these images, all I did was download these off the internet. There's lots of pretty pictures available. You could have used a stamped image if you wanted to. You could cut an image out of a magazine, and that would be gorgeous as well. And you're going to cut these out and put these onto your page. So this is what the two little girls are going to look like once they cut out, the friends. You can see the cutting out still has got a bit of a white edge on the edge. We're going to deal with that. That's part of the finishing off that we're going to do on this. And now we're just going to put them into their right spot. You can glue these onto the page using glue, or you can use your podge to do this. I'm going to use a little bit of podge. I'm positioning them where I want them to be, sort of towards the bottom of the page, because after all their legs are cut off, so I need to make sure that it looks like cut off legs and not floating in the air legs. So now you just want to make sure that these are nicely stuck down. Now, if I'd wanted to, you could put Mod Podge over these images and seal it again, but you don't really need to. And what I don't want on this is I don't want a shiny surface that I can't work over. So I'm not going to do that in this case. What you could, however, use is a layer of clear gesso, because the gesso will seal it off and you'll be able to use anything over it once you've done. So now we need to make these look a little bit more in proportion. They just kind of look like they've been pasted on the page. We need to go to the next step, which involves a little bit of shading. So for that, we're going to use a variety of pens and pencils. So to create a little bit of shadow effect around the edges of the doll so that they stand out a bit nicer, I've got a couple of pens that I can use, and I've also got watercolor pencils that I can use. I've gone with the brown colors because that's going to make it blend in quite nicely into the background. And all you're going to do is, using your pencil, go around the edge and create a little bit of a shadow. Now you're going to use your paintbrush, wet it just a little bit, and just blend those in. And you're going to keep on going all the way around. You could do a similar kind of thing using your marker pens. As long as they're water-based, they'll work. So when you do this, you want to be sure that you're getting rid of all the little white telltale lines that were visible around the girls. So here's one that I've completed. You can see they've got a little bit of a shadow around them, giving them a little bit more pop. So now we need to finish off this page. You can choose which sort of sentiment that you want to add to the page, a message or just something special you want to say. And I also feel that the page needs a little bit more detail. So for this, I'm just going to use a regular marker pen in different sizes, with thinner nibs, with thicker nibs. It's up to you. And I'm going to draw. So I'm just doing, you don't need to be an artist to do this. I'm just doing very, very random little curls and designs around the edge of the page. I do like a page to have a border. I feel the page always looks better once it's been finished off with a bit of a border. I'm making sure that my lines go behind the girls so that they can be in front of it, the main feature on the page. And now I add in a couple of extra little doodles. So once I've done a fair amount of work with the black pen, I'm going to have a look at just darkening the border a little bit more. So I'm going to go back to my ink pad and my blending tool. pick up a bit of colour there and just go around the edges and give it a little bit of a shadow here. I've got that. What I also like to do with this now is to add a few more pops of contrast. So I'm going to use a white marker pen and I'm going to add a few more white little spots on there just to give it a little bit more contrast. So now all that's left to do is to add my little message. You can do this in different ways. I've got a little message that I found on the internet that I really liked for this project. And you could stick this as one big solid piece on the page, but I prefer it when you actually do cut them into little strips. It gives it a little bit of a more focused look. I've also got a stencil that I'm going to use. The stencil gives you a lot of options of different colors and techniques that you can use through it. I'm just going to use it in the regular old-fashioned way, trace out the words and then color them in with my markers. Once again, you can see my cutting is not perfect. It's really got a very random style to it, but that's okay. And I'm going to cut up the words a little bit so that it makes a different layout. Okay. Now I need to position where I'm going to put my title, which is the word friends, and I'm going to use my stencil for that. Again, using my marker. So I'm doing this fairly randomly. You can go over it afterwards and tidy it up a little bit. There we go. So now it's just a matter of looking at where you want your layout of words to be. So I'm going to start with that there, the best kind of friendship. There we go. So now we're just going to glue. Okay, and that's the last little line. A great thing to do now is to add a little bit of edging to those letters as well. Once again, you can do that using a marker pen and just put a border around them. Blend it in a little bit with your brush. You can use a water brush or just a damp brush so that you have a nice edge around your words, which will pop out a little bit more. So that's the project. This is what it's going to look like when it's done. You can make this your own. You can choose the colors that you'd prefer to use in this. But whatever you do, just give it a try. And I hope that you enjoy it. And until next time.